In today's video, I'm gonna walk through how I made this. A little bit of backstory before we get into it. One of my good friends, Garrett, FaceTimed me and was like, dude, you have to check out this camera. Also, listen to all of the little sounds. And I was like, this thing sounds so cool, just like all the mechanics and all of that stuff. And he was like, we should do another video. And by another video, this was the first one we did.
Is this even on?
So a few days later, he sends me this beautiful footage, and now I'm gonna walk you through what I'm gonna do with it. All right, so to start us off, we're just gonna leave it soloed with just the camera audio, and I'm gonna turn off the reverb. So this is strictly the camera audio. The moment that I cut this together and I got all the like air out of it and I knew that this was about the length of everything, I immediately heard like a reversed reverb whooshy into a beat sound, and I was like, it just needs to like build right at the end. And so what I did, which was I added a reverb. The reverb I added was Valhalla plate. Not at 1%, it's at 42% once it's full, but I have that go like this. So I have it automate in, which to view the automation lane is A on the keyboard shortcuts, and I just have it automate with a little bit of a curve, and it just plays into the last two clips. What I really like to do to get that whooshy sound, I will take the piece that I want to make the reverb tail. In this case, I have to remove the automation because I need it to be like full reverb. So do that, freeze it. Now that it's frozen, these lines mean that there is audio happening beyond the clip with some sort of effect that you have on it, which in our case would be the reverb. So let's add a channel, an audio channel below it, and we will just hold Option and copy, duplicate that file below it, and now, with just soloing it, we have burnt-in audio. And that's all we had to do. And then we can unfreeze. That key command is too long for me to remember, and now that I say that, I'm probably gonna remember it forever. So I will get rid of that full like open sound, and then I will click on this and I will reverse it, which I'm usually a big proponent on key commands. Is it just R? Oh, it's Shift R. Oh, look at me go. Okay, learning something new. All right. So then to add it to where it goes, so the one tricky thing about when you do these reverse things, of course it's not gonna do it now, when you make it and you cut it down, it's probably gonna be just a random length. Ironically, I had placed it in the exact spot, but you would zoom in and make sure that the end is in the right spot. So let's say like, let's mess this up. So let's say that it sticks to the grid there, and like that's where you want it to start. We want it to start. I can't drag it out to the right because then it has that click and a gap. So I have to hold down Command to drag it to the edge of the grid, which is what I did. And then I can drag out the tail however far I want it to go. And in this one's case, I also dragged their crossfade, or just their fade tool, and I just dragged her up. And this is the sound. And if we go back to the original one, how close did we get when we did it? Pretty close. A little less click on the back end, but I kind of like the click more now. Oops. Arguably, the craziest part of the whole thing is the drums, or rather the beat that came from all of the things. Let's make a new MIDI track. I'm gonna open up the browser window. I guess now's a good time to show. I did add a groove to it. So the groove that I added to it is the MPC 3000 16th 64, which it sounds like this. And I just dragged it into the groove pool, and because it was already in the groove pool with Ableton 12 or 12.1, or I don't remember which version it is, but it will put it to any new clips. So it will put it on the clips as you add new ones. So we are going to add an instrument, not an MPC instrument. So let's just drag and drop that baby in. I'm also using the Valhalla plate again on this. And voila. I did skip over why I picked the reverb I picked. I would like to show that actually. I used the Valhalla plate reverb on this. And usually I would use Valhalla's vintage verb. That's my favorite, but I love plate reverbs. There was something about the vintage verb that was like too normal of a reverb for this. So I chose plate to see if it got a little bit weirder, and it did, which is perfect. And I landed on unobtainium. And you can see the settings. It's at 42 once it's at full on this, so it's like, and 6.9 seconds. But it was between unobtainium and adamantium. But in the end, unobtainium had, one, a cool name, and two, way more like bright airiness to it. The adamantium is just kind of like dark. There's just like a little sizzliness to the top of it. I don't know. I liked it, and that's where I went with that. Okay, back to the drums. There's one fake sound, one actual synthesized sound, which is the kick. Kind of the one that I feel like when you're doing something like this definitely needs to be the one real's the wrong word, the one actual musical thing. So I'm using the drum synth kick that comes with Ableton. And it's a Max for Live device. This is the kick. It's very electronic. It's very like synthesized kick. That's without any of the effects. I picked F sharp as the note, not related to any of the sounds and notes that were to this. This is the second version of something I had written for this video, and F sharp just happened to be what I was hearing that day. So there's a little bit of drive on it. It's got a little bit of decay. I added a tack, which means it's not as sharp, so that it leaves room for the clickiness of the actual camera sound, as opposed to I hear no difference now. So let's go to roar. Roar is sick. I love roar. So roar is in multi-band mode and at 50% wet or 49% wet. So you get half of the dry sound and half of the roar sound. I'm doing nothing to the low end because I don't want anything happening with the low end, but the mid and the high is where I'm doing some stuff, and the amount and the bias is the only real things I'm changing between the mid and the high. It's the same distortion or shaper. So the mid gets 21% with the bias, so this is it. And this is without it. It's pretty subtle. And then the high is getting this. I guess I could turn all these off still. It's the crispiness that's like sizzliness at the top of that. I did have to lower the frequency a little bit for the low pass because there was just too much crispiness at the top. It's so subtle, like it's hard to hear. And it is kind of like digitally distorting a bit, which I love. And then the EQ is not doing anything too crazy. I'm just raising the low end a little bit at 51, lowering the mids a bit, just kind of like a one fell swoop of getting rid of some of the mid-range, and then raising this like high but not super high because the other kick is filling in the other spots. So like without the EQ, with the EQ, it's just a little bit tighter, just a little bit tighter. And that's really it for the kick, for the fake kick. So the way I added all of these things, all of these little sound bites and picked what they were, it was kind of a toss-up. I really didn't want this to be cheesy. So when I was picking the sound for the kick specifically, the kick, the snare, and the hi-hat were the three that really needed me to like hone in on what of the sounds was not gonna feel so cheesy. Because you can make these videos and they can be kind of cheeseball, that you're like using real stuff and making it sound fake or sound like synths or like electronic, like computer generated or whatever. So I wanted to be careful because like at first I was like, oh, just setting it down on a table. A table's a big thing. It's going to be really bassy and have a lot of like room, and it felt too cheesy. And then I also had to think about like when I edit the video together, I don't really want to see his hands setting the camera down just constantly. And so if it's the kick, then I'm going to see that the whole time. And it's not that it's not cool, but it's not that cool. Also, it's kind of high pitched. I can make it lower, but like I didn't really love that. So as I was watching everything, the only other thing that had like a really good, like solid, beefy, like click sound was the screen flip. And that was really what I was like, ooh, okay, that's gonna be the kick. And I was like, and it's a camera, and it's like, you can see the screen. Garrett did like a phenomenal job at like focus and where this thing, it's such a good shot. And so I was like, okay, that's gonna be the star of this. So I gotta make sure that this sounds cool with the kick. Oh, I'm getting slightly ahead of myself here. The way I added all these in, I took the file as it was already cut up and I just drag it into the drum rack and place it on any of the spots wherever I want it. But when I do that, if you look at the clip, there's a bunch of nothing and then the sound because we see the whole thing happen. So we have to zoom in here and move the start time of this to be real close to the edge, and the end is probably fine. Something I know that I did is I transposed this down 9 steps. You might be asking yourself, Taylor, how do you know it was down 9 steps? I sat at this stupid part of this process for way too long. It was at like -6, -8, -12, negative. At the end of the day, I was just listening to the two of them together and I was like, 9 seems to gel the best. So we went -9, and this is the two together. And it just feels right. So as it's all tied in together, it's very tight to the sound. So it's very on the grid. I do have an EQ on it, which is bringing up some of the low end, getting rid of some of the mid range, and bringing up some of the 3700 range for the high end. So this is without the EQ. And this is with the EQ. Again, just like a little bit tighter. It's not like, I'm not like trying to transform everything crazy with this. But the two together sound really good. Now I'm gonna skip the snares real quick, and I'm gonna go to hi-hat and the lens getting twisted on, which I labeled shaker on here. Because the next thing, like I had said, the kick, snare, and hi-hat were like the most important sounds. Actually in this, it's really the kick and the hi-hat. The snare is kind of everything tossed at the sound for this, which I think is kind of fun. Kind of makes it, you kind of hear something different every time. When I was looking for a piece that was gonna be the hi-hat, I was like, dude, I don't know, man. Like, it could kind of be any of these sounds, but I realized pretty quickly I wanted it to be like a tight, clicky sound. And what I decided on is the SD card getting clicked in, which I think is, if I'm looking at this, it's this. Yeah, so it's this piece. And which I'm about to show you, I left that secondary click in the sound because I really liked that there was this weird like extra texture to it. So the sound is, it's not like fully prominent, but it's still there. And if you notice, I left a little bit of air, so it's not perfectly tied to the grid that it's on. It's a little tiny bit late, which just kind of added a little more character. And it just has an EQ on it, which is with a big old 6 dB boost at 10K. So this is without the EQ. And then this is with the EQ. And then the shakers, these were really hard for me to play with. I wasn't really sure how the heck I was gonna include these in this. I knew that I wanted to. Obviously, like he sends me all of this, I'm gonna try to use every single piece of it, which I did. But I was kind of like, how can I include these? Because it's such an abrasive sound. Here, this is what the sound is. Which at first you're kind of like, it's not that bad. But then I labeled it shaker because I needed to think about it like a shaker. But I have two of them because I broke this same clip into two. One is the whole thing, and then the other one is the like second 2/3 of it. So the first one is the whole thing. And then the second one is just the little back end of it. I set the sample mode to gate instead of trigger, so that way, as long as there is a MIDI note happening or I'm pressing play, it will play, and then the moment that I release or stop the MIDI note, it stops. Everything else is triggered, so you press it and it plays the whole thing, versus hold it down, then release and it will stop. Because I needed to add some more texture to these. So if I play the file of this, let's solo these. Here is what just the lens is doing. So it's really just adding like a little extra top end to the loop. I think I did not play you the hi-hat, so let's play just the hi-hat here. When I hear just the hi-hat alone, it's kind of disgusting to me, and I kind of hate it, but it works so good with everything else. Now, okay, now snares. These are fun. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, technically I have 7 snares. I don't know why I labeled some of them percussion. I think I was gonna try and get a little more creative with percussive loops in here. I decided that was not the move, and I wanted to just vomit snare sounds. So the first one we have is this, which is the sensor cap coming off here. I can show you the video. It is this. That's the first snare. And then the second snare, that is the lens getting attached, which if you would like to see. And then this is the shutter button. What is this one? What is that one? This? Oh, okay. This is the lid, the side door closing. And then that's the side door locking shut. And then this is the lens cap coming off. And then this one is the side door opening, which is this video. Nope, it is this video. That is the only other thing that I also have set to gate instead of trigger. I want to show you these separate. There's so many thingies. Okay. For the only really other thing that I did to make these have a little more pizzazz is I used a really dope new thing that's part of Ableton 12, is this in this pitch and time on the side of the clip view, there is a humanize button, and I have it set to 10%, and every time you press it, it changes 10% of where they are on the grid and the order and arrangement to make it feel a little more human, as the name would say. They're moving depending on how I'm doing it to give a little bit more character. So using the humanize across all of those, you can see that I think I copy and pasted. So like that one's the same as, oh man, I'm not even gonna try to read that. Maybe this one's the same as this one, kinda. I don't know, but I placed this one in different spots intentionally off the grid to give a little more like depth in when a snare hit. Okay, these macros, don't worry about their fiddliness. I am not using it in this song. This was a valiant effort by me that if the song that I was working on that I use this on comes out, I'll explain it then. The next part of the drum track that I got to talk about is the return that I have, which these are usually hidden. So it's on this little icon section on the side. You just hit the R for the return. So you can add a return track inside the drum group of the drum rack. If I'm way off the deep end with you guys, let me know. I can do more in-depth stuff on this. It's fun. I really enjoy it. So I'm happy to do that. That's a side note. So this reverb is the same reverb as before. But I lowered the decay. So the decay is 2.7, and I think that's the only thing I've changed really. So if we solo the reverb, because at the 6.9 seconds, it was like way too mushy and long and too much stuff was happening. But then also I have this crazy EQ happening, which is like a high pass at 130, losing a ton of the mid-range, which I'm already lowering it in here, and then raising it at 1600 hertz, and then lowering the high shelf at 3200 hertz. This is without the EQ, and this is with the EQ. And then here is the whole thing with the reverb, so you can contextualize it. I'll turn it on and off. And I'm gonna now turn on and off the EQ with it on with the beat, so you can hear why I did this craziness. The reverb kind of almost becomes like a textural piece to the whole thing with this crazy EQ. Sometimes I don't ask questions, I just do it and leave it, even if it looks crazy and incorrect. Now the whole chain outside of the drum rack, there's only two things happening. This EQ is purely just like a default EQ. I didn't even feel I needed to EQ and like cut stuff down. But I am using a bus compressor, which this is the Native Instruments solid bus compressor. I love this thing. It's the same thing as the glue compressor in Ableton. What I like to do is I like to set the output or the dry. It's kind of weird. So it's like the output's at 100, which is the compressor output, and then I bring the dry back to 50%, which kind of makes stuff louder, but it doesn't really make it that much louder. Plus I compensate for it in the overall level. But there's something that it does that's special to the like mix that is really nice. I've got the attack at 30%, the threshold wherever it needs to be, ratio at 4, release at 0.2 seconds with a little bit of makeup gain. My goal is always like never more than 4 dB of compression on it with this guy. And that's basically what it's hitting, which is why the threshold's there. And here's with it on and off. Here you go. There's something about it that it tightens it up just enough. And yes, it is a little bit louder, which is part of the excitement, but it's not, I don't know. There's something about it that I like. And then the drum bus, I have 20% drive. I've got it on soft. I don't really like the medium and the hard settings for the drive. And then I have a little bit of crunch. The damp is at 14K, and I'm losing a little bit of transients on it to de-emphasize them. And then I've got the boom up 24%, and I made sure that it's at the right key or right note that the synth kick is playing, which is F sharp. So here's without the drum bus. And there you have the drums. That's it. That's all she wrote. Now onto the bass. So the bass line is just try to keep it as simple as I can. Sometimes I have a hard time writing bass lines or, any melody lines, I guess. Welcome to the curse of being an artist. I knew when I was writing this, I needed it to be something like big and bold, and wavetable tends to be where I gravitate to. There's so much variability, and I really love the modulation matrix and how much I can go crazy with like what all the settings and stuff are doing on the whole thing. This was a preset that I dove into and tore stuff out of. I think presets are a really great jumping off point. I don't love just like, that's a preset, I'm not changing it at all. But I love that I don't have to sit there and be like, oh, this is the waveform I want to use. This is how I have to morph it to get it to this spot to then do the thing. I used to really, really dive into just like making sounds. Now I just really want to make like some sort of music. Both are so awesome, and I have so much respect for anybody that does any of it, honestly. I'm saying all this because I feel like I have to validate why I'm using a preset sort of in here, so, Okay, so this setting is really sweet. So it's just regular waveforms. Like if we turn this off, we're just using like a pulse width form in the basic waveform, but then there's a modulation to it that's warping it or folding it 72%. So it's really just morphing it through this tear setting. I've moved around where it's tearing it up. I've changed the sub level a little bit. I've changed this warp amount in this oscillator. The majority of the stuff I did was I fiddled with all of the modulation. So like the modulation sources, let's open this up. So the modulation sources over here, I have them synced a little bit different, and well, the two LFOs are going through the warps at different rates. And that's kind of what's giving it the texture. And then I'm automating in this frequency envelope. And that's kind of the majority of it. One of the other things I added was this LFO, and I have it automating the volume so that it adds a little bit of bounce. Here's with it off. It is so subtle, but it's adding a little bit of rhythm to it. And then I'm adding a sidechain to the kick, and I have it sidechained post effects on the synth kick, the drum synth kick. Here's without the compressor. It just tightens the kick and the bass so that it feels almost like it's one a little bit. And then there's an auto filter which I use for this little intro piece. And then you'll notice that the LFO is doing more and going faster. I automated a little bit of offset, so it changes the depth of it and how much it's affecting, and the rate going from 8th to 16th, and then the main is a quarter note. And without the auto filter, you can hear it better, so it's just like... Again, it's still super subtle, but I hear it. Dude, honestly, I sat here for a while and I was like, dude, I gotta add something else. And I was like, wait, no, just keep it simple. And so that is it. I'll play it from the whole beat for you. Okay, we're not done yet though, because there's one more step. So I exported it out of here. Well, after I mixed it and got the levels all good, I exported out of here, brought it into Final Cut, Now, if you know nothing about Final Cut, that's great, that's fine. I had to recut all of the whole beginning piece because I was using the audio that was exported from Ableton. And so I used this to line up these beginning pieces because I didn't do it this way to begin with, which I guess I could have. So now all the clips are cut where they're supposed to be. And then I eyeballed where all these hi-hats are. So it's really not, I'm not doing that much in here, but I eyeballed where everything is. The kick really is this sound. And so I put all the kicks in. So I did hi-hats first, I put the kicks in second, and then I picked the different sounds that are for the snare, and I did a different one for each part pretty much as I went through it. So like we have this one that I feel like is the most prominent of the sounds. And then I have this as one of the other sounds because you can hear it flick at that point because the MIDI was longer, if you remember. And this sound is also one of the snares, so I wanted you to be able to know that you're hearing it, and same with this one. Even though the shudder's really subtle in this. And this one feels like the most out of place to me, it always did, but it is one of the sounds, so I wanted to make sure I used it. And I had to use this one twice to really seal in that the lens is the sound. And then I end it with the flick because the flick happens again and you can hear it like jiggle at the end of it. This is where movie magic comes in. I think this first one is the only one that's synced. Yes, it is the only one that is actually right. The other ones are wherever the hell it made it look kind of right. Anyway, I want to watch it one more time. Let's go. That's so sick. Honestly, I'm super proud of this, and I'm stoked that G and I got to do another one of these videos. These are so fun. I love taking sounds that are from like normal objects and being able to turn it into something that's not like cheesy, but like cool, and it can be a beat. If you liked this video, please subscribe. I have a lot more coming. I have a lot more stuff I'm doing. I'm doing sound videos, performance videos, and a lot more walkthroughs. Got a top-down camera now, so we're gonna do some like desk view lay flats coming up. It's gonna be sick. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Until next time.